The Three Brains That Decide Everything in Your Life. An original work by Oscar Gonzalez, created for Biblio Studio. Chapter 1. The Theater Inside Your Head. Your life can be understood as a play. On stage, the spotlight shines on you. You speak, decide, react. You believe you control everything happening in your mind, but the truth is that behind the scenes, three very different characters argue among themselves. They decide the plot, often before you even notice. These three characters are not poetic metaphors, but real structures that live in your brain. The reptilian brain, the ancestral guardian in charge of survival. The limbic system, the emotional heart that remembers, feels, and ties your decisions to past experiences. The neocortex, the rational architect, capable of planning, imagining, and creating. If you think about it, at every moment of your day they are conversing, debating, and negotiating. From what to have for breakfast, to whether you should take a risk on a new project or stay silent during an argument with your partner. You believe you are the absolute master of the play, but in reality, you are more like the stage on which they act. Over millions of years, evolution didn't discard the old when building the new. We don't have a clean modern brain, but rather a collage of superimposed layers. Paul D. MacLean, a pioneering neuroscientist of this vision, called it the triune brain. It is not three separate brains physically, but three systems that coexist, heirs of different stages of evolution. The reptilian brain emerged with the first vertebrates, specialized in automatic behaviors, breathing, fleeing, fighting, mating. The limbic system consolidated with mammals, adding the world of emotions and affective memory. The neocortex, the most recent layer, expanded in primates and reached its highest complexity in humans, enabling language, abstract thought, and self-awareness. Your skull is, therefore, a living museum of evolution. Archaic relics coexist with ultra-modern structures, and together they direct your life. Let's imagine a simple situation. You're at home at night and see a freshly baked pizza. The reptilian brain reacts immediately. Food, energy. It activates salivation, speeds up digestion, and generates that almost irresistible urge. The limbic system brings back memories. The pizza you shared with friends in your teenage years. The joy of feeling accompanied. It doesn't just want food, it wants to recreate an emotion. The neocortex intervenes with its speech. You shouldn't. You need to watch your diet. Remember the goal of losing weight, but at the same time it is so skilled that it justifies, just one slice won't hurt. Besides, tomorrow I'll work out extra. The outcome will depend on which of the three brains manages to convince the others. And almost always the reptilian and limbic join forces against the logic of the neocortex. Perhaps you think of yourself as a very rational person, but neuroscience shows that most of your decisions are made outside your awareness. The neocortex arrives late. It fabricates explanations after the reptilian or limbic have already decided. A curious study by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s showed that the brain initiates the action of moving the hand almost half a second before the person feels the conscious intention to do so. This means that your conscious self is, in a way, a narrator inventing a story to justify acts already set in motion by your deeper layers. The Latin poet Lucretius, more than 2,000 years ago, wrote in De Rerum Natura, "Although the mind commands the body, many times it is violently dragged by it." He knew nothing of neurons or neurotransmitters, but he intuited what neuroscience confirms today. Our reason is not the sole captain of the ship. Imagine these three brains as three actors sharing the stage. The reptilian is the veteran actor, with rough and repetitive gestures, but reliable when it comes to saving your life. The limbic is the passionate actor, capable of crying and laughing, of convincing you with pure emotion. The neocortex is the intellectual actor, always holding a complex script, full of ideas and plans. The problem is that there is no director. You are the audience, watching, and often you only understand the chaos after the scene has ended. The power of knowing yourself. Why does this matter? Because ignorance of your three brains makes you their slave. When you know how they work, you can identify who is taking control at any given moment. If you react with disproportionate anger, it is probably the reptilian taking command. If you buy something just because you deserve it, it may be the limbic seeking an emotional reward. If you stay paralyzed, overthinking without acting, it is the neocortex trapped in loops of analysis. Becoming aware of these dynamics is like turning on the light in the theater. Suddenly, you see the actors, recognize their roles, and can influence the play. In the 17th century, an English physician named Thomas Willis was among the first to systematically study the human brain. His drawings, made with the help of an artist who also painted for Shakespeare, revealed structures no one had described before. Willis argued that the mind was intimately tied to the architecture of the brain, breaking with the mystical idea that the soul floated separately from the body. Interestingly, Willis spoke of a multiple brain long before the theory of the triune brain existed. He intuited, centuries before MacLean, that within our head coexist layers of different natures that shape who we are. Chapter 2. The Ancient Guardian, the Reptilian Brain. There is a part of you that knows nothing of poetry, philosophy, or mathematics. A part that does not wonder about the meaning of life or care about the beauty of a sunset. It only wants to make sure you breathe, eat, defend yourself, reproduce, and sleep. That part is the reptilian brain, the primitive watchman you carry within. Even if you live surrounded by screens, technology, and buildings, inside you beats a core that could easily have inhabited the body of a lizard 200 million years ago. The reptilian brain is the oldest layer of our nervous system. It lies deep within, surrounded by the limbic system and covered by the neocortex. Its heart is formed by the brainstem and the cerebellum, structures responsible for vital functions, breathing, heartbeat, reflexes, balance. It has no interest in innovation or progress. Its mission is simple: to keep you alive as long as possible. It is the foundation upon which the other brain layers were built, a kind of survival platform that never shut down. The reptilian doesn't need your permission. If you accidentally touch a hot stove, you pull your hand away before you even feel the pain. If someone throws an object at your face, you blink and turn your head in milliseconds. That autopilot is the reptilian at work, fast, rigid, without nuance. It doesn't analyze contexts or weigh alternatives. It only executes patterns engraved in the deepest roots of biology. During World War I, an unusual case was recorded in a British military hospital. A wounded soldier began getting up at night and marching through the hallways in his sleep. He didn't respond to orders, but his body followed a perfect military drill pattern. Doctors concluded that his reptilian system had taken control, reproducing automatic movements without the need for consciousness. This episode reminds us that the reptilian not only regulates breathing, but also ritualized behaviors, walking, defending territory, repeating routines. The reptilian specializes in what some neuroscientists call the 4 F's. 1. Feeding, the drive to seek food and water. 2. Fighting, aggression to defend or protect resources. 3. fleeing, the automatic response to danger. 4. Fornicating, the sexual drive to perpetuate the species. What's interesting is that, even though you believe you are making free choices, these impulses remain active in your modern life. The craving at an all-you-can-eat buffet has roots in the ancestral need to accumulate energy. The tension of arguing on social media activates circuits similar to those of a real fight. The irrational fear of public speaking may be an extension of the ancient threat of social exclusion. The instant attraction toward someone responds to selection mechanisms your reptilian brain triggers before you can reason. You might think that in a modern workplace there is no room for archaic instincts, but look closely. Open office spaces generate territorial behaviors, choosing a desk, marking a spot. Promotions awaken hierarchical struggles that mirror animal dominance rituals. Even the way someone places their chair or objects on a desk reflects micro-territoriality. In short, your reptilian brain still marks territory like a lizard basking on a sunlit rock. The Roman physician Galen, 2nd century AD, wrote in one of his treatises that the fiercest passions are not born from the heart, but from what lies hidden deep in the brain. Although he did not know modern anatomy, he intuited that there was an ancient core responsible for primary impulses. Galen was among the first to suggest that not everything in the human mind was rational or emotional, that there was a hidden command rooted in biology. The reptilian and irrational fear. Have you ever felt a sudden jolt of panic when seeing a shadow move at night, even knowing it was probably just a branch or your jacket hanging on the chair? That startled reaction comes from the reptilian. In fact, studies show that humans react faster to images of snakes and spiders than to neutral figures. Even if you live in a city where you will never encounter a viper, your reptilian brain is still programmed to detect them, because for millions of years those reactions increased survival chances. The reptilian was designed for dangerous environments where threats could appear at any moment. Today, however, that same system is hyperactivated in contexts that pose no real risk. An urgent phone notification causes a micro-adrenaline surge. Heavy traffic triggers fight or flight responses. A job interview can spark the same physiology as a predator attack. Your reptilian doesn't distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and an email with a red subject line. To it, danger is danger. In a Japanese laboratory in the mid-20th century, an experiment was conducted with macaque monkeys. They were placed in a room with very low air conditioning temperatures. Some learned to press a button to regulate the heat, but others could not make the connection. Interestingly, those who didn't learn developed repetitive behaviors, banging on the floor, rocking back and forth, screaming. These behaviors, similar to those of caged animals, were manifestations of the reptilian seeking release from discomfort. They didn't solve the problem, but gave the illusion of control. Sound familiar? Think about it the next time you slam the table because the internet is slow. Perhaps you don't notice, but every day your reptilian dictates micro-decisions. Eating quickly because your body believes food might run out. Sitting in the same seat on the bus as if it were your territory. Feeling uncomfortable when someone invades your personal space. What to you seems like a simple habit, to your reptilian is pure survival. You might think of the reptilian as a saboteur ruining your modern plans. But remember, without it, you wouldn't be alive. It is the guardian that keeps you breathing while you sleep, the one that speeds up your heartbeat so you can run if a car approaches, the one that makes you pull your hand away from fire. The problem arises when, instead of protecting you, it becomes hyperactive in a world where threats are no longer physical but symbolic. Chapter 3. The Heart of Emotions, the Limbic System. If the reptilian brain is the guardian that ensures your physical survival, the limbic system is the architect of your emotional and social survival. It is the part that makes a hug comforting, that brings tears with a memory, that lets a scent transport you back to childhood, or that makes a glance spark trust or distrust in a fraction of a second. The limbic system is, in essence, the theater of emotions, and what's most fascinating is that emotions are not mere ornaments of life, they are decisive in every one of your choices. The mammalian origin of emotions. With the arrival of the first mammals, nature made an evolutionary leap. It was no longer enough to survive day by day. Offspring needed to be cared for longer. Bonds had to be formed, and the environment had to be learned. For this, a brain was needed that could remember experiences charged with emotion. From this need, the limbic system emerged, a network of structures including the amygdala, hippocampus, thalamus, hypothalamus, and cingulate cortex, among others. Its main function, to assign emotional value to experience. If the reptilian brain answers, "Is it dangerous or not?" the limbic system asks, "How does it make me feel?" Among all the parts of the limbic system, the amygdala is perhaps the most famous. Its name comes from the Greek amygdalae, almond, due to its shape. It is responsible for detecting threats and triggering intense emotions such as fear or anger. When your amygdala is activated, your entire body responds, sweating, rapid heartbeat, muscle tension. This reaction has a purpose, to prepare you to flee or fight. But it also explains why criticism can hurt like a blow, or why you relive past mistakes with anxiety. We all know, or have heard, the story of Phineas Gage, the worker who survived an iron bar piercing his skull in 1848, and whose personality changed. But another case, less known, was described in 1835 by French physician Jean-Baptiste Biblio. He treated a patient with frontal lobe lesions and documented drastic changes in his emotions, from kind to violent and impulsive. Biblio did not reach Gage's fame because his patient did not survive long, but he was one of the first to show that brain damage could alter a person's emotional life. His observation anticipated what the limbic system would later demonstrate. Without emotions, our humanity collapses. The hippocampus, guardian of emotional memory. Do you remember the smell of the food from your childhood, or the music that was playing when you first fell in love? You owe that to the hippocampus, which works hand in hand with the amygdala to store emotionally charged memories. It doesn't store cold data like a hard drive, but memories that beat, that ache, or that inspire. That's why you easily forget the grocery list, but never forget the first time someone broke your heart. Every decision you make is tinted by the palette of the limbic system. When you choose a clothing brand, you don't just choose fabric, you choose the emotion of belonging. When you prefer one route to work, it may be because a past accident left an emotional mark. When you distance yourself from someone without knowing exactly why, it may be because your amygdala detects micro-signals of distrust. The limbic system filters the world through the prism of emotion. We believe we are rational beings, but the studies of Portuguese neurologist Antonio Damasio showed otherwise. His patients with limbic system damage could reason perfectly, but were incapable of making practical decisions. They could endlessly analyze the pros and cons of something as simple as what to eat, but never chose. Why? Because emotions are the compass that guides reason. Without them, life becomes an ocean of options without direction. The naturalist Alexander von Humboldt, during his travels in South America in the 19th century, wrote, We do not remember with as much force the facts we learn as the impressions they leave in our soul. He was speaking of mountains, jungles, and volcanoes, but his intuition fits perfectly with modern neuroscience. What affects us emotionally is recorded more strongly than what is merely informative. The limbic system does not always play in your favor. Sometimes it hijacks you. An overactive amygdala can lead you to live in constant anxiety. The hippocampus can replay traumatic memories over and over. The search for emotional reward can turn into addictions, from sugar to social media. The limbic system is powerful because it moves you, but precisely for that reason, it can drag you if you're not aware of its influence. The power of empathy. It's not all threat and pain. The limbic system is also the foundation of empathy. When you see someone cry and feel a lump in your throat, it's not your neocortex analyzing, it's your limbic system resonating with the other. In fact, brain imaging studies show that when observing someone suffer, the same areas in your brain activate as if you were suffering yourself. This explains why someone else's pain can hurt almost like your own. In 1958, a group of naturalists in Kenya documented something surprising. A female elephant remained for hours beside her dead calf, touching it with her trunk and emitting deep sounds. The rest of the herd also approached and seemed to stand in silence. That behavior cannot be explained solely by reptilian instinct. It is a display of mourning and attachment, behaviors of a complex limbic system. It reminds us that emotions are not a human luxury, but a legacy shared with other mammals. The limbic system and your identity. Think about how you describe yourself. Cheerful, melancholic, passionate, calm. All those labels come from your limbic system. You are not only what you think, you are, above all, what you feel. The limbic system gives continuity to your life. It reminds you who you are because it remembers how you have felt in every stage. Without it, your personal story would fragment into soulless data. Chapter 4. The Rational Architect, the Neocortex. Imagine for a moment a blank canvas. On it you can paint a future that does not yet exist, invent worlds no one has ever seen, or build theories that explain how the stars work. Reptiles and most mammals don't have that power. That power comes from the evolutionary jewel of our brain, the neocortex. While the reptilian brain guarantees your physical survival and the limbic system governs your emotional life, the neocortex is the rational architect that organizes, plans, reflects, and imagines. What is the neocortex? The neocortex is the outermost layer of the brain, with a surface folded like a labyrinth. If we could stretch it out, it would cover nearly half a square meter. In it reside our most sophisticated capacities: language, the ability to communicate with symbols; abstract thought, solving equations, imagining utopias, inventing religions; self-awareness, knowing that we know, reflecting on our own mind; creativity, from painting murals to programming artificial intelligence. Its explosive evolution in humans set us radically apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. A unique evolutionary leap. About 3 million years ago, the brain of the first hominids was barely half its current size. Then something happened, an expansion of the neocortex that made language, culture, and technology possible. Carl Sagan once said the neocortex is the machinery of civilization. Without it, there would be no cities, no laws, no poetry. What's fascinating is that this development didn't eliminate the reptilian or the limbic, it simply built on top of them, creating the chaotic coexistence we feel every day. One of the greatest achievements of the neocortex is language. It allows us to share not only information, but also imagined realities. We can talk about things that do not exist: a unicorn, a paradise, a future equation. Linguist George Lakoff argues that language is not just a tool for communication, but a structure that shapes how we think. Without it, our emotions would remain trapped in screams or gestures, and our ideas would be nothing more than fleeting sparks within. In 1960, a Soviet player named Alexei Suetin taught a blind student how to play chess. The young man memorized the board in his mind and moved pieces on an adapted board with nails. Surprisingly, he not only played well, he competed in tournaments. The boy's neocortex transformed verbal coordinates into mental images as vivid as those seen with the eyes. This case demonstrates the abstract power of the neocortex to create internal realities that can substitute for the senses. The neocortex gives us the ability to plan and analyze, but it can also paralyze us. Have you ever been faced with a decision and found yourself stuck thinking, unable to act? That's what's known as analysis paralysis. While the reptilian shouts, "Do it now," and the limbic pushes with a clear emotion, the neocortex opens up an infinite range of possibilities. Its excess of rationality can turn into a vital break. The Arab philosopher Al-Farabi, in the 10th century, wrote in his treatise, The Virtuous City, "Man is distinguished by the faculty of projecting in his mind what does not yet exist in reality." That phrase, forgotten among medieval texts, sums up the essence of the neocortex, anticipating and constructing possible futures. We don't just analyze, we also create. Cave paintings from 30,000 years ago in Chauvet and Altamira already showed that humans could project visions onto stone. Where did that impulse come from? From the neocortex, which combines memory, imagination, and emotion to generate something new. Today, that same power allows us to write novels, design robots, or compose symphonies. Yet creativity never emerges from the neocortex alone. It always dialogues with the limbic system, which provides emotion, and with the reptilian brain, which adds instinctive energy. In the 19th century, a Danish architect named Jens Ferdinand Willumsen designed buildings not with precise blueprints, but with poetic descriptions. He said, "I see the form in my mind like a fog that clears." His assistants then translated those visions into technical calculations. The case of Willumsen illustrates how the neocortex can function like a projector of inner images that others can turn into reality. One of the simplest yet most revealing experiments to test self-awareness is the mirror test. A mark is painted on an animal's forehead, and it is placed in front of a mirror. If it tries to remove the mark from its own forehead, it means it recognizes itself. Very few species pass this test: dolphins, elephants, great apes, and humans starting at around 18 months of age. That recognition is possible thanks to the neocortex, the awareness of being oneself. Curiously, the same power that gives us consciousness also allows us to deceive. To lie, one must hold two realities in the mind, the true and the false. That ability is a product of the neocortex. This explains why very young children lie clumsily, because their neocortex is not yet developed, and why adults can invent elaborate narratives. Lying, paradoxically, is a sign of cerebral sophistication. The neocortex gives us culture, science, and art, but also anxiety, overthinking, and self-deception. It is capable of justifying anything, even when the decision has already been made by the reptilian or the limbic brain. For example, you impulsively buy a pair of shoes, limbic, and then your neocortex fabricates a story. I needed them because it was an unmissable offer. In reality, it's just acting as the defense attorney for your emotions and impulses. Chapter 5. 3 Voices Arguing in Your Head. If you've ever found yourself torn between following your heart or doing the right thing, or if you've caught yourself eating something you swore you wouldn't while your mind invents excuses, you've witnessed an inner debate much deeper than you imagine. It's not just indecision, it's 3 different brains arguing with each other. The reptilian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex all speak with different voices, have different interests, and often clash. The curious thing is that you, the conscious self you believe is in charge, are often more of a spectator than a director. 3 brains, 3 languages. Each brain has its own language. The reptilian speaks in impulses and reflexes, hunger, fear, desire, territoriality. The limbic speaks in emotions, joy, sadness, shame, euphoria. The neocortex speaks in thoughts, arguments, and plans. The problem is that these 3 tongues don't always understand each other. It's as if an animal, a poet, and an engineer were living inside your head. Let's set a daily scene. Your alarm rings at 6 in the morning. The reptilian says, "Keep sleeping. You need to conserve energy." The limbic adds, "The bed is so warm it would be such a pleasure to stay here." The neocortex tries to negotiate. "If you get up now, you'll have time to work on your project and improve your life in the long run." Who wins? It depends on the day. And what seems to you like a simple battle against laziness is really the manifestation of an evolutionary clash inside your brain. Often, the reptilian and the limbic team up against the neocortex. It makes sense. Both are older and react faster, while the neocortex takes longer to process. Example: you're walking down the street and see a fast food ad. Your reptilian reacts, "Food, calories, immediate energy." Your limbic remembers the pleasure of a juicy burger. Your neocortex tries to warn, "You need to watch your diet." The result? You end up walking into the restaurant. Later, your neocortex fabricates the excuse, "I did it because today was a hard day and I needed to reward myself." The philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal in the 17th century wrote an intriguing phrase, "The heart has reasons that reason does not understand." It is often quoted romantically, but Pascal wrote it in the midst of his inner struggle between faith and mathematical logic. In his private letters, he confessed that, although his intellect told him one thing, his emotions and spiritual instinct dragged him toward another. His testimony starkly reflects how the neocortex can become trapped between the forces of the limbic and reptilian brains. Modern neuroscience shows that many decisions are the result of a tug-of-war between brain areas. The amygdala, limbic, lights up with immediate rewards. The prefrontal cortex, neocortex, tries to hold back and plan for the long term. The brainstem, reptilian, makes sure you don't compromise basic safety. That's why quitting smoking, starting a diet, or saving money is so difficult. It's not just a matter of willpower, it's an internal civil war. In 1920, a Viennese violinist named Rudolf Kolisch faced a dilemma. Should he continue his solo career or join a string quartet? He spent months undecided. His diary, discovered decades later, reveals entries where one day he exalted the security and prestige of playing in a group, limbic plus reptilian, and the next he dreamed of the personal glory of being a soloist, neocortex. In the end, he chose the quartet and became a world-renowned figure. His case shows that even seemingly rational decisions are woven through with this polyphony of brains. The emotional hijacking. Sometimes the limbic system takes command and the neocortex is shut out. Daniel Goleman called this the amygdala hijack, when emotion is so strong that it blocks reason. Example, you argue with someone and, in a burst of anger, say things you later regret. In that moment, your limbic system shut down your neocortex. Only afterward, when the storm passes, do you regain the ability to analyze. The Stoic philosopher Seneca warned, "No person becomes angry for a true reason, but because their mind allows itself to be carried away." Without neuroscience at hand, he already intuited that reason can be eclipsed by deeper forces. But the neocortex is not always the victim. It also manipulates. It fabricates narratives to justify what your older brains have already decided. Example, you impulsively buy a red car because you loved it, and later you say, "It was the best option for safety and performance." Rationality is just a disguise. And the voice of the self? If the three brains argue, then who are you? Some philosophers suggest that the conscious self is a narrator, not a commander. Your identity would be the story the neocortex invents to give coherence to impulses and emotions that have already happened. It's uncomfortable because we like to feel we're in full control. But perhaps true freedom lies in knowing your inner voices and learning to negotiate with them rather than pretending to dominate them. Chapter 6. The Biology of Your Decisions. Every time you choose something, from a simple coffee or tea to a career change, you cannot imagine the complex orchestra that comes alive within you. What you call a decision is not a single or instant act, but a layered biological process where your three brains intervene: the reptilian, the limbic, and the neocortex. Even though you like to think you decide with full rational freedom, the reality is more surprising. Many times, your choice is already made before you realize it. The journey of a decision. Reptilian impulse. First comes the automatic reaction: hunger, fear, attraction, rejection. No analysis, only immediate action. Limbic filter. Then emotion comes into play. That impulse is colored by memories, pleasures, fears, and social bonds. Neocortical narrative. Finally, the neocortex analyzes, compares, justifies, and builds a coherent story. The final result is a decision you feel is yours. But in reality, it is a forced agreement between three systems that rarely agree. The Enlightenment philosopher Denis Diderot, besides writing the encyclopedia, was fond of chess. In a private letter to a friend, he confessed that in the middle of games he felt moves arise out of nowhere before he thought them. Only later did he find the strategic justification. That testimony anticipated what we now know. The deep brain decides, and then the rational mind explains. An invisible actor in all this is dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation and reward. When your limbic system perceives a possible gain, it releases dopamine, which acts as a push toward action. The reptilian brain detects the opportunity. The limbic system lights up with anticipated pleasure. The neocortex dresses it up with a good argument. Example, you see a pair of shoes on sale. The reptilian, energy, protection for walking. The limbic, you'll feel good, you'll look attractive. The neocortex, they're 40% off. It would be foolish not to buy them. The power of context. Your environment influences you as much as your biology. Behavioral economic studies show that the way an option is presented changes the decision. It's not the same to say you have a 90% success rate as you have a 10% failure rate, even though they are identical. Who reacts to these subtleties? The reptilian responds to instinct, avoid loss. The limbic feels the emotion of winning or losing. The neocortex embellishes with rational justification. The Russian writer Ivan Turgenev wrote in a letter in 1863, "I don't know if I think what I feel or feel what I think, but everything in me seems decided before I notice." A novelist, not a scientist, but his intuition matches what neuroscience shows today. Consciousness is the last to find out what has already been decided. The struggle between short and long term. The reptilian brain and the limbic system love the immediate. Calories now, pleasure now, safety now. The neocortex, by contrast, projects into the future. Saving, investing, studying, planning. That struggle explains why it's so hard to maintain healthy habits. Immediate pleasure almost always wins over future benefit. It's not a lack of character, it's biology in conflict. In the 1970s, Walter Mischel conducted the famous marshmallow experiment with children. They were offered one marshmallow and told that if they waited without eating it, they would later get two. Some resisted, others didn't. It is often told as a lesson in self-control, but in reality it was an X-ray of the three brains in action. The reptilian wanted to eat it right away. The limbic wavered between desire and the expectation of reward. The neocortex tried to invent distractions and strategies. The children who managed to wait didn't have some magical extra willpower. They had found ways to give their neocortex an advantage over the reptilian limbic duo. There are situations where the neocortex simply has no time to intervene. A car suddenly swerves into your lane. The reptilian brain turns the wheel before you think. Later, your neocortex tells the story. I decided to swerve to avoid the crash. That delay is not a flaw, it's an evolutionary advantage. If we waited for reason to analyze, we wouldn't survive. Decision as negotiation. Ultimately, a decision is like an internal negotiating table. The reptilian brings safety to the table. The limbic brings emotion and memory. The neocortex brings arguments and projections. When one dominates too much, extremes appear: impulsivity, overwhelming emotionality, or rational paralysis. Balance is what leads to wiser decisions. Chapter 7. The Reptilian Brain in Modern Life. When Paul MacLean coined the idea of the reptilian brain, he described it as a primitive guardian ensuring the essentials: breathing, fleeing, eating, reproducing. But even though we no longer live in caves or share territory with predators, that ancestral watchman is still as active as ever. Today, in the digital age, the reptilian brain no longer battles saber-toothed tigers, but instead faces emails, traffic jams, demanding bosses, and floods of notifications. Its mission remains the same: to keep you alive, even if that means reacting with strategies designed for a world that no longer exists. The reptilian brain in the urban jungle. Think about a traffic jam. You're surrounded by cars, the noise is deafening, and someone suddenly cuts you off. Instantly, your body tenses, your heart races, your muscles prepare to fight or flee. That physiological response is identical to what your ancestors would have felt facing a predator. The difference is that today you can't punch the driver next to you or run off the highway. The energy prepared by your reptilian brain gets trapped, turning into chronic stress. Marketing and the reptilian brain. Modern advertising knows your reptilian brain well. It doesn't appeal so much to logic as to your most basic instincts: survival, the insurance that protects what you love most. Territory and status. Drive the car that shows who you are. Reproduction. Campaigns where sensuality is tied to a perfume or clothing. Food. Red and yellow colors in fast food chains that trigger immediate hunger. Big brands don't convince your neocortex. they seduce your reptilian brain. In 2005, a University of Rochester study showed that men rated women wearing red as more attractive and desirable without being aware of why. Fascinatingly, in other animal species such as baboons, the color red is also associated with fertility. This means your reptilian brain responds to ancestral signals you don't even consciously recognize. The reptilian brain in the office. Even if you think your work is purely rational, look closely. Do you have a favorite spot in the meeting room? That's your reptilian brain defending territory. Do you feel uncomfortable when someone comes too close to your desk? That's your reptilian brain protecting vital space. Do you feel upset when a colleague gets the praise you expected? Your reptilian brain interprets that someone else is climbing the hierarchy. Work life, with all its modern language, is in large part a jungle of reptilian rituals disguised as formality, fear as a driver of consumption. The reptilian brain responds with particular intensity to fear. That's why many political and advertising strategies rely on activating threats. If you don't buy this insurance, your family will be unprotected. If you don't vote for us, the country will collapse. If you don't get this product, you'll be left behind. It's an ancient trick. When your reptilian brain is activated, your neocortex shrinks. Fear narrows your field of vision and pushes you to act quickly without much reflection. The philosopher Francis Bacon wrote in the 17th century, "Fear is the swiftest messenger of the soul." He said it long before neuroscience existed, but it perfectly describes how fast the reptilian brain takes control in the face of threats. The reptilian brain in politics. Political speeches that appeal to reason often pale in comparison to those that awaken primitive emotions: fear, pride, security, belonging. The reptilian brain understands the language of flags, anthems, and uniforms. It's no coincidence that many authoritarian regimes use powerful visual symbols, rituals, and collective gestures, direct keys to the most archaic part of the brain. We often hear about the hypnotic power of Hitler's speeches, but rarely is it mentioned that his architect, Albert Speer, designed stages with columns of light and perfect symmetries to provoke a sense of grandeur and submission. That visual theater was not for the neocortex, but for the reptilian brain, to awaken the instinctive feeling of smallness before something greater. Social media also knows how to activate your reptilian brain. Every red notification is a micro-alert that pushes you to check your phone. Every like is a small reward that activates the reward circuit. Your reptilian brain, once designed to react to noises in the jungle, now responds to vibrations in your pocket. Even in dating, the reptilian brain sends signals. Prolonged eye contact can trigger attraction or distrust in seconds. Body posture reveals confidence or submission before a word is spoken. Scents, even if you don't notice them, influence your choice of partner. Pheromones play a role in compatibility. On a dating app, your neocortex thinks you're choosing based on photos and bios, but your reptilian brain decides in a fraction of a second whether someone attracts you or not. The dark side, chronic stress. The great problem of the reptilian brain in the modern world is that it lives in alarm mode. It was designed for brief, concrete threats: a predator, a fight, a storm. But today it faces abstract and constant dangers: bills, deadlines, emails, economic uncertainty. The result is a continuous state of activation that sickens the body: hypertension, insomnia, anxiety. Your reptilian brain keeps firing adrenaline even when there is nothing to flee from. Chapter 8. The Limbic System and the Emotional Trap. If the reptilian brain watches over your physical survival, The limbic system ensures your emotional and social survival. It connects you with others, gives meaning to your personal story, and colors every memory with shades of joy, fear, sadness, or excitement. But here's the catch. What allows you to feel intensely and bond with others can also become a trap. Your emotions are compasses, yes, but compasses that sometimes misalign and push you toward decisions that from the outside look irrational. Every emotion is, in essence, a biological shortcut for quick action. Fear prepares you to escape. Anger mobilizes you to defend yourself. Sadness invites you to withdraw and reflect. Joy reinforces behaviors worth repeating. The problem is that in the modern world, where threats are no longer predators, but emails or awkward silences, those emotions can become disproportionate responses. The amygdala is the sentinel of the limbic system. It detects threats and sounds the alarm before the neocortex can assess whether the danger is real. That's why you might scream in fear at a shadow that turns out to be your coat. This amygdala hijack is useful in emergencies, but becomes a problem when it overreacts. Arguments between partners that escalate, paralyzing stage fright, constant anxiety with no apparent reason. In 1890, French neurologist Jules Cotard described a peculiar patient. After a severe fever, this man developed the belief that he was dead. He wandered the streets of Paris with a bell, announcing that his body was empty. Although today we would call it an extreme case of psychotic depression, what's interesting is that current studies suggest his limbic system had disconnected the emotional charge from his self-perception. He knew he was breathing and walking, but since he felt nothing, he concluded he must be dead. This extreme case reveals that our identity depends deeply on emotion. Without it, even the clearest reason is distorted. The limbic system stores memories associated with emotions. That's why you remember your graduation day more vividly than a routine class. The hippocampus and amygdala work together to make emotional events stick strongly. But this advantage comes at a price. Painful memories are also etched with greater intensity. A failure, a rejection, a humiliation can replay in your mind years later, as if they were happening now. During World War II, in some prisoner camps, bread was served in poor condition. Decades later, survivors reported they could not stand the smell of fresh bread because their limbic system had encoded it as a signal of suffering. This example shows how emotion not only accompanies memory, but also distorts it and keeps it alive in the body. The role of dopamine and addiction. The limbic system is especially sensitive to dopamine, which reinforces pleasurable behaviors. Eating sugar, getting a like on social media, or winning a bet trigger small bursts that teach the brain to seek more of the same. This circuit, useful in natural environments, can become a trap in modern society where artificial rewards abound. We don't just seek pleasure, we seek to repeat the emotional surge. The French writer Jules Renard wrote in his diary in 1894, "People think they govern their feelings. The truth is, their feelings govern them." He wasn't a neurologist, but his intuition matches what we know. The limbic system, with its arsenal of emotions, is a king disguised as an advisor. The limbic system can also deceive you with nostalgia. You may remember your childhood as happier than it was, or a relationship as more intense than it really was. Why? Because the limbic system reconstructs memories tinted with emotion, not preserved like photographic files. This explains why nostalgia is such a powerful tool in marketing and politics. It activates a longing in your limbic system that your neocortex cannot refute with arguments. The limbic system doesn't need a predator to flare up. Sometimes all it takes is the fear of social disapproval. In fact, for many people, public speaking causes more anxiety than the thought of death. From an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense. In small tribes, being excluded meant losing protection and resources, a mortal risk. Your limbic system still interprets disapproval as a life-threatening danger. In 1872, Charles Darwin wrote to a colleague about his self-observation experiments. He tried not to blink when a snake struck the glass separating him from it at the zoo. Although he rationally knew he was safe, his body jumped uncontrollably. That episode shows how emotion, processed by the limbic system, overpowers the reasoning of the neocortex. Emotions are not enemies, they are guides. But when we are not aware of them, they can manipulate us. Understanding that your limbic system colors every decision is the first step to not getting caught in its nets. Ask yourself, am I deciding because it benefits me or because it soothes an immediate emotion? Am I remembering an event or the emotion that came with it? Am I rejecting someone for what they did or for how they made me feel? Chapter 9. The neocortex, between genius and mental traps. When we talk about the neocortex, we often praise it as the pinnacle of evolution, the part of the brain that makes us human, creators of art, science, and philosophy. And indeed it is. But what is fascinating, and at the same time unsettling, is that this rational architect also has a dark side. It can be a source of brilliance, but also of self-deception, paralysis, and unnecessary suffering. In this chapter, we will explore how the neocortex allows us to imagine impossible worlds and, at the same time, craft brilliant excuses to justify our mistakes. The brilliance of the neocortex. Let's start with the light. The neocortex is responsible for creative imagination, painting cave murals, designing skyscrapers, or writing novels, abstract thinking, mathematics, philosophy, quantum physics, planning, projecting a future, organizing resources, anticipating consequences, language, communicating shared realities and passing culture from generation to generation. Without the neocortex, there would be no civilizations, no written history, no collective projects that transcend individual life. The problem is that the neocortex doesn't just analyze, it also invents convincing narratives. Many times after we have acted on impulses from the reptilian brain or the limbic system, the neocortex steps in to justify the decision. Example: you buy a red car because you loved it, a limbic impulse, and then your neocortex creates a story. It was the safest choice, with the best fuel efficiency. You sincerely believe it, but in reality, you're listening to a story your own brain fabricated. Benjamin Franklin, in addition to being a scientist and politician, discovered a curious trick. When he wanted to win over an adversary, he would ask them for a favor, like lending him a rare book. Once the person complied, they had to invent a logical explanation. I helped him because he's a good person. This phenomenon, now known as the Franklin effect, shows how the neocortex creates narratives to explain behaviors that have already occurred, reshaping our perception of reality. Analysis paralysis. The neocortex has another trap: rational hyperactivity. When faced with a decision, it can open up an infinite array of possibilities, so many that you end up taking no action at all. Have you ever spent hours comparing products online, only to feel exhausted and buy nothing? That's your neocortex caught in a maze of analysis. Ironically, in its quest for the perfect choice, it can lead you to make no choice at all. The Spanish writer Baltasar Gracian, in El Criticón, 17th century, wrote, "He who thinks too much achieves little." He didn't know about neuroscience, but he understood the paralysis caused by excessive reflection. The neocortex also gives us the ability to lie. To deceive, we must hold two realities in our mind, the true one and the false one. This requires great cognitive flexibility. A young child, whose neocortex is still developing, lies clumsily. "It wasn't me, it was the dog." An adult, however, can build elaborate narratives. Here lies the irony. Lying is actually a sign of advanced brain evolution. In 1995, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated that she could implant false memories in volunteers. All it took was repeatedly suggesting that, as children, they had gotten lost in a shopping mall. After a few weeks, many participants remembered the event vividly, with rich details. This happens because the neocortex doesn't just reason, it also constructs convincing fictions to the point of deceiving itself. But let's not forget its luminous side. The neocortex allowed us to paint the bison of Altamira, write the Odyssey, and launch rockets to the moon. Its ability to combine ideas, to merge memories with imagination, to transform symbols into realities, makes it the engine of innovation. Interestingly, many artists and scientists describe their moments of inspiration as if they came from outside, like a sudden flash. In truth, it's the neocortex connecting internal networks so rapidly that the conscious self doesn't even notice the process. In 1741, Georg Friedrich Händel composed the Messiah in just 24 days, barely sleeping. He said he felt as if someone were writing through him. What he was experiencing was his neocortex in a state of hyper-connected creativity, where the boundaries between the self and the work dissolved. This same mechanism is described by modern geniuses across many fields, from science to sports. There's one last detail. The neocortex can create imaginary worries. It anticipates possible futures, which is useful for planning, but it also generates anxiety over scenarios that may never happen. The reptilian brain fears a real predator. The limbic system fears immediate criticism. The neocortex fears a hypothetical future. What if I fail 10 years from now? These kinds of thoughts can become a chronic burden. The key to balance. The neocortex is a double-edged sword. Without it, there would be no culture or civilization. With it, we can fall into traps of rationalization, lies, and overthinking. The secret isn't to shut it off, but to recognize when it's being creative and when it's fabricating excuses. Chapter 10. Reprogramming the Inner Trio. So far, we've explored how the three brains within your skull, the reptilian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex, function like actors with different roles, one instinctive, one emotional, and one rational. We've also seen how they often clash, and how, without realizing it, one or another takes control of your life. But here's the good news. Although you cannot eliminate any of them, you can train them to work in harmony. Reprogramming the inner trio doesn't mean silencing the reptilian brain, suppressing the limbic system, or idolizing the neocortex. It means balancing them so they complement one another. Recognizing who's in charge. The first step is to notice which brain is leading at any given moment. Without awareness, you live like a passive spectator of your own play. With awareness, you become the director, adjusting the lights and timing of the scene. Ask yourself, am I reacting impulsively? Reptilian brain. Am I being swept away by intense emotion? Limbic system. Am I trapped in endless overthinking? Neocortex. Naming what's happening in your mind is the first step to reprogramming it. Techniques to calm the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain acts like an alarm system. To train it, reasoning alone isn't enough. You must calm its physiology. Some effective practices include deep, slow breathing, tricking the reptilian brain into believing there's no danger. Physical movement, running, dancing, stretching, releasing the energy your body prepared for fight or flight. Safety rituals, creating stable routines to give the reptilian brain a sense of control. Example: many top-level executives practice recreational boxing or martial arts. It's no coincidence. They're allowing their reptilian brain to discharge tension in a controlled environment. Training the limbic system. The limbic system needs to feel heard. Suppressing emotions only makes them grow stronger. To reprogram it, keep an emotional journal. Naming what you feel helps the neocortex process it. Practice gratitude. Recognizing the positive retrains the limbic system to detect resources rather than threats. Seek healthy connections. Surround yourself with people who nurture constructive emotions. A little-known historical example comes from Swiss physician Johannes Hofer, who in the 17th century first described nostalgia as a disease. His soldier patients suffered so deeply from being far from home that they became physically ill. Today, we understand that the limbic system needs positive bonds and memories to sustain physical health. Strengthening the neocortex. The neocortex can become a powerful ally if you train it. Meditation and mindfulness reduce rumination and increase clarity. Continuous learning, studying, reading, solving problems keeps the neocortex flexible. Step-by-step planning. Breaking big goals into small, concrete actions prevents analysis paralysis. Fascinatingly, studies on neuroplasticity show that learning a new language or playing a musical instrument literally thickens areas of the neocortex. It's like a mental gym. During World War II, the Royal Air Force used a curious training method for its pilots. Before missions, they were asked to visualize every movement of the flight, from starting the engines to facing attacks. What they discovered was that the neocortex rehearsed as if it were real, strengthening coordination with instinctive and emotional areas. This mental training increased their chances of survival. Today, elite athletes use this very same visualization technique, the triangle of reprogramming. We can summarize the process of reprogramming in a simple triangle. Calm the reptilian brain. Reduce physiological stress. Educate the limbic system. Channel emotions and create new associations. Train the neocortex. Strengthen reason, creativity, and self-awareness. When this triangle functions well, your decisions stop being a chaotic battle and become a harmonized chorus. The power of habit. Good intentions are not enough. True reprogramming comes from habit. Each time you choose consciously, instead of being carried away by impulse, you reinforce neural circuits. Over time, this new way of responding becomes second nature. William James, pioneer of psychology in the 19th century, summarized it beautifully. All our life, insofar as it has definite form, is but a mass of habits. Your inner trio is shaped not by grand revelations, but by small, repeated choices. The danger of imbalance. Important note, this is not about turning off one brain and glorifying another. Suppress the reptilian brain too much, and you lose your survival instincts. Block the limbic system, and you become cold, unable to connect with others. Exalt the neocortex, and you may get trapped in a world of ideas without action. The true art lies in synchrony, not suppression. An unexpected example. Music as integration. Neuroscience shows that when you play an instrument, all three brains work together. The reptilian brain maintains the basic rhythm. The limbic system brings emotion and expression. The neocortex organizes the harmonic structure. Perhaps this is why music has such therapeutic power. It forces our three brains to collaborate rather than compete. Chapter 11. The Three Brains in Society. So far, we've explored how the reptilian brain, the limbic system, and the neocortex operate inside you, generating impulses, emotions, and reasoning. But your decisions don't happen in a vacuum. You live in a society surrounded by symbols, institutions, and narratives that also appeal to these three brains. In fact, much of politics, religion, advertising, and culture relies on the art of selectively activating one or another collective brain. What's fascinating, and sometimes unsettling, is that what happens inside your head is mirrored in the minds of crowds. The reptilian brain in groups. When large groups gather, in stadiums, demonstrations, or rituals, the reptilian brain is usually activated. This leads to behaviors such as territoriality. This is our team, that is the enemy. Repetitive rituals, chants, uniforms, flags, hierarchy, leaders concentrating power, crowds obeying. It's no coincidence that societies create strong symbols like crests, anthems, or military uniforms. These are direct shortcuts to the collective reptilian brain, which needs to feel protected and part of a group. Few people know that in Spartan battles, soldiers didn't just march with discipline, they moved to the beat of drums. That steady pulse maintained synchronization and triggered the reptilian instinct to follow a tribal pattern. The drum wasn't a musical ornament, it was a neurobiological device designed to align reptilian brains and increase cohesion in battle. The limbic system in society. Advertising, politics, and religion constantly appeal to the limbic system. Advertising doesn't sell products, it sells emotions. A car isn't just transportation, it's the freedom of feeling the wind on your face. Politics. What mobilizes people isn't technical programs, but pride, indignation, fear, or hope. Religion offers emotionally charged narratives, rituals that generate belonging, and symbols that evoke reverence. The collective limbic system needs stories to get excited and strengthen social bonds. The sociologist Gustave Le Bon, in The Crowd, A Study of the Popular Mind, 1895, wrote, "The crowd never reasons, it simply feels." He exaggerated, but his observation captures the power of the limbic system when people gather. What convinces the masses are not arguments but shared emotions. The collective neocortex manifests through science, rational agreements, hypotheses, demonstrations. Law, abstract systems of rules that transcend fleeting emotions. Education, transmission of ideas and reasoning. But even here, the neocortex doesn't act in isolation. For a scientific theory to spread, it needs the emotion of discovery and the instinct for social recognition. In 2011, Iceland invited ordinary citizens to draft a new constitution using social media. It was an exercise in collective neocortex, rational debate, proposals, abstract discussions. However, the process stalled when reptilian interests, power, territory, and limbic emotions, fear, collective pride, came into play. This case illustrates how even the most rational efforts collide with the other layers of the brain. Manipulating the three brains. Anyone who understands this model can manipulate it. If you want obedience, activate the reptilian brain with fear or hierarchy. If you want mobilization, activate the limbic system with intense emotions. If you want lasting consensus, activate the neocortex with solid arguments. History is full of leaders, advertisers, and artists who mastered these keys. In 17th century Paris, the plays of Molière didn't just make audiences laugh. According to accounts of the time, people left the theatre feeling united, as if they had shared more than mere entertainment. Why? Because his comedies satirized the aristocracy, simultaneously activating the limbic system, shared emotion through laughter, the reptilian brain, group identity against the elite, and the neocortex, critical reflection. It was a total experience for the three brains. The dark side, propaganda and manipulation. When knowledge of the three brains is used without ethics, propaganda emerges. Governments and companies design messages that bypass rational filters by activating instincts and emotions. A classic example is war propaganda, which combines reptilian brain, portraying the enemy as a mortal threat; limbic system, stirring hatred or compassion; neocortex, justifying the conflict with seemingly logical arguments such as, "We fight for freedom." The result is powerful control over collective behavior, the possibility of social integration. Not everything is manipulation. We can also use the three-brain model to build more balanced societies. Public policies that address basic needs. Reptilian brain. Cultural and community programs that strengthen emotional bonds. Limbic system. Education and rational debate that foster critical thinking, neocortex. When these three dimensions are recognized and balanced, society can truly flourish. Chapter 12. Integration. When the three brains work together. Up to this point, we've explored the sometimes chaotic forces within you. The reptilian brain with its instincts, the limbic system with its emotions, and the neocortex with its reason. We've seen them as actors in conflict, as voices that argue and contradict one another. But there's another possibility, for them to form a harmonious orchestra. When the three brains work together, you are no longer a victim of your impulses, a prisoner of your emotions, or a slave to your rational mind. You become a whole being, capable of feeling, thinking, and acting with coherence. The ideal of internal coherence. True freedom does not come from suppressing one brain and glorifying another. It's not about killing the reptilian brain, turning off the limbic system, or worshipping the neocortex. The key lies in internal coherence, aligning instinct, emotion, and reason so they all move in the same direction. The reptilian brain provides energy and action. The limbic system brings motivation and meaning. The neocortex offers planning and vision. When these three parts align, the power of authenticity emerges. Imagine someone training to run a marathon. The reptilian brain drives the discipline of daily training, moving the body and enduring fatigue. The limbic system provides motivation, the excitement of self-improvement, and the joy of sharing the event with others. The neocortex organizes strategy, diet, rest schedules, pacing. If even one of these three were missing, the goal would be impossible. It is their union that transforms a challenge into an achievement. In the Shaolin temples of China, monks trained in martial arts not just for defense, but as a method of mental integration. Combat represented the reptilian brain, survival instinct. Meditation cultivated the limbic system, emotional regulation. The study of sacred texts exercised the neocortex, reason. Their discipline wasn't about one dominating the others, but rather balancing all three. Perhaps this is why they could experience inner peace even in the midst of combat. Neuroscience and harmony. Recent studies show that people with higher emotional well-being are not those who eliminate fear or anger, but those who can coordinate the activity of different brain regions. The prefrontal cortex, neocortex, regulates the amygdala, limbic system, without suppressing it, allowing emotion to exist without overwhelming the person. At the same time, the body, reptilian brain, responds appropriately, neither too aggressively nor too passively. Integration is not the absence of conflict, but dynamic harmony. The Indian philosopher Sri Aurobindo in the early 20th century wrote, "The true mind does not deny the body or the heart. It organizes them as a king organizes his kingdom." Without knowing neuroscience, he perfectly described the ideal of the three-brain integration. Understanding the opposite, when one brain dominates. To grasp the importance of integration, consider what happens when one brain rules alone. Only the reptilian brain dominates impulsivity, aggression, addictive behaviors. Only the limbic system dominates emotional roller coaster, dependence on others. Only the neocortex dominates analysis paralysis, emotional disconnection, excessive coldness. Imbalance creates suffering. Integration creates wholeness. A poorly directed orchestra sounds chaotic. The drums, reptilian brain, pound uncontrollably. The violins, limbic system, overflow with emotion. The winds, neocortex, try to follow the sheet music without success. But when a skilled conductor aligns them, music flows. That is how your integrated brain works. Each part plays its role without trying to overpower the others. Strategies to cultivate integration. Listen to the body, reptilian brain. Exercise, eat well, get enough rest. Nurture emotional life, limbic system. Acknowledge your feelings, build healthy relationships, practice gratitude. Train the mind, neocortex. Read, learn, plan, and reflect. Moments of silence and connection. Meditation, music, or time in nature can serve as bridges between the three brains. The future of humanity. If evolution gifted us this complex trio, the challenge of the 21st century is learning to integrate it. In a hyperconnected, overstimulated world, the reptilian brain is overactivated. The limbic system is overloaded with emotions. The neocortex is drowned in excess information. The true revolution won't be technological, but inner. Learning to orchestrate our three brains so we can live with greater coherence, connection, and meaning. We've reached the end of this journey. You've met your three brains, learned about their battles and their traps. You've seen how they influence your daily life and shape society. Now you know the real challenge is not to choose one brain over the others, but to help all three work in harmony. The next time you make a decision, pause and listen. Is it your instinct, your emotion, or your reason speaking? And most importantly, how can you get them to speak in unison? There lies the key to a fulfilled life. You've been listening to The Three Brains That Decide Everything in Your Life, written by Oscar Gonzalez and produced by Biblio Studio. Thank you so much for listening.